When did you meet FBR? During those times, or was it just really, well,
I didn't really know him, but I heard much about him because we come from the same part of the country.
Tam?
In San Nicolas, I come from San Nicolas, Pangasinan,
Yes.
which is just 2 towns away from Singan.
Yes, yes.
So when we were growing up, I was more familiar with his father, si
Secretary.
Secretary
Ramos.
Narciso Ramos, because he was the youngest congressman of our district.
Ah, okay.
And, he was one of our idols.
Secretary
Because he
Ramos.
was so young, and he was able to bring down old politicians when he ran. He was only in his 20s. And he came, and most of our old folks were talking very highly of him and his wife, Angela Valdez Ramos.
Right, right.
So from those talks, I sometimes hear that they had a son, Fidel Ramos, who was in the military. But the next time I heard was when Rafael Salas sent me to Sweden. He sent all of his staff abroad for training.
Yes.
I was fresh from graduation from the university. I was not very keen on studying further because most of us were given scholarships in America. So I said I just want to travel, and I chose Sweden as an area of travel and study. One of the people that I met in the church where I used to attend in the old town of Stockholm was a cadet in the West Point. And he said, "You're a Ramos. You must know Fidel Ramos." Well, I have heard about him. We come from the same part of the country. But how come you know him? Well, if you do well in academics or in some areas, we march before the cadet, and we often march in front of Fidel Ramos, he said. So he must be one of the outstanding students of West Point. I've been telling the president about this fellow, but unfortunately I forgot his name. He was an military attaché in Stockholm at that time.
Okay.
So when I became after Malacanang, when Rafael Salas had the spat with President Marcos and he left for the United States, we resigned from the office. And I got a call from the company that sponsored my trip to Sweden. And they said, "We have already invested in you. Why don't you work for us? So we have a project that we want you to handle, and that is to introduce the first disposable lighter in Southeast Asia, Fudor, which became Cricket now."
Wow.
So I was the one who built the first factory for that in the Philippines, and then I also opened up the market in the whole of Asia Pacific, from Japan, Korea down to New Zealand. So after the EDSA revolution, I was offered a job to return to government. Yeah. So after 18 years in the private sector, I was keen to go back to government because Rafael Salas planted the seed of public service in all of us among his Salas boys. That's why we were really prepared to work with the bureaucracy again and to serve the country. So I took that opportunity. I worked under Secretary Fulgencio Factoran during the administration of President Cory Aquino.
Okay.
That's how I got back to government.
Then you got back to government. But when did you meet? FBR?
Well,
was he still in the military? Was he already
at that time he was the
secretary?
Secretary of National Defense.
There? Okay.
And oftentimes, as undersecretary, I was the senior undersecretary in the DENR. I would attend the cabinet. And I would see him there, but I never really had a chance to sit down and talk to him about our common origins, I only knew that we were not relatives.
That, strangely enough, you know?
Yeah,
You had the
because,
same
yes.
family name.
Same family. We come from Ilocos. My forebears passed through Binmali, which their forebears also did
Right.
before we moved to San Nicolas.
Right.
Their forebears moved to Asingan.
Singan, right.
Oh.
And you were in the same congressional district?
Yes, and we belong to the same church, Cosmopolitan Church.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And you come from the same backgrounds, no? Engineer?
Ako hindi, mascom ako.
Ah, Mascom. Okay.
I could not pass my Math 11 in college, so I had to keep on shifting to courses without quantitative methods.
And you found yourself in mass communications. Okay, so, but when was the first time that you actually spoke or exchanged, you know? When was the first exchange? But I suppose at that time, you were undersecretary, senior undersecretary. He was secretary. I mean, he was already quite a legend by that time, you know?
Yeah, because
Because of
we
his
discussed
role in
things in the
EDSA.
cabinet. So, but one time when I had an inspection trip to Negros Oriental, I had to go to Dumaguete. So at that time you have to communicate with your local office through radio.
Correct.
So my radio man sent a message to our guys there and said, Undersecretary Ramos visiting Dumaguete, you meet him. But he was not able to press the microphone early. So what came out was Secretary Ramos. So when I arrived at the airport, there was a contingent of military men meeting me. So, I said, no, there was a mistake. I'm sorry, I said. No, since we are already here, we have to escort you. So that's how I was. But I didn't know I have to feed all of them. So I ran out of money with my small allowance from the DENR. That was one of the things that I remember about being a Ramos, with the famous, sharing the name with the more famous Ramos. So I first met him when he decided to run for the presidency. The office of President Cory made a survey on who were supportive of the president. Of course, I was supporting him. So for the DNR, I was pinpointed as the representative in the campaign. So we met. We were meeting. And then...
so he was candidate Ramos pa lang?
He was candidate Ramos.
Pero LDP pa nun.
Ano siya? He lost in the convention.
He lost the primary, yes.
Yeah, and then he just decided to run on his own and put up his own party.
Right.
So that was the party that we supported.
Okay.
That's how we came in. So the first time I really sat down with him was, there was a meeting, Manang Leticia Hani told me, Vic, you better get to know Fidel. Why don't you attend this meeting? So I attended one meeting in the corporate center in Makati. After the meeting, I was the only one left because I wanted to talk to him. And but he was making calls. One of the calls that I remember he made, made such a strong impression on me because he was telling someone on the other line, you cannot use your guns against me. He said he was very strong. I have more armed men than you have, so do not mess up with me. So I never asked who was the other fellow on the other end, but that was just after the convention when he was fighting with Mitra. Apparently the other guy was with the other camp.
Okay.
And I said, this is a strong fellow. He came out very strongly. That was an aspect of his character that impressed me quite a lot.
Yeah, that was the first impression.
That was the first impression on a face-to-face basis because we were just the two in the room.
Right. But that was overhearing him on a conversation over radio or the
telephone.
Right. What was it like when you first spoke with each other? Were you able to speak with him during that that incident?
Not much.
After that?
Not much. He He did not even ask me about myself or my background. You know, he just knew. He already knew who we were. He has a very good staff in that regard.
Okay.
He was very well briefed on the people who volunteered to support him in the campaign.
What was he like then as a candidate?
He was very professional. He was not like your local politician.
Okay.
Yeah. He was always talking about a certain vision of the country, you know.
Okay.
Very long-term thinking, you know. But I could feel that all this vision was anchored on a good moral basis. That's why, you know, one could feel that this is a guy that can really lead the country and make a difference.
Wasn't it difficult campaigning for him? I mean, the war chest of LDP was much larger, I suppose, than Lakas, diba? Lakas CMD. What was it like?
That is quite true, but you know, we knew the dynamics of local politics, that what matters is your network of personal supporters.
All right.
And he has that very strong network in the military,
Okay.
you know. And then, with the backing of an administration, that is another parallel network.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So he had...
So that is something that is very difficult to quantify and to... It's a strong base to run any campaign.
So he leveraged on his own network. Huh?
Oh yeah, that was, you know, you cannot win and you cannot manage the bureaucracy unless you have your own personal network.
Okay.
You cannot depend on the people that you will inherit or absorb in the government while you are there.
But how did those relationships impress on you, Secretary? Because, I mean, diba? There are relationships and there are relationships. I mean, was he really tight? Was he very close? Was there already the FVR touch in those relationships? So much so that, you know, his network stood by him.
You know, he was. It was a very impressive network that he had. You know, people who were thinking long term, people who are implementing on a micro level. He's able to bridge the strategic, political, and the tactical levels in governance. And he has people on every level. That's why, you know, that is something that our adversaries in the other parties did not know. Oh, they only knew Fidel Ramos as a neophyte in politics, but this is the secret power that was inherent in his political campaign. We had the people who were personally attached and who believed very highly on the president.
So, throughout the campaign, that was what, maybe about 90, 120 days, or officially 90 days. But you started as early as what, maybe December, no? After losing the LDP primary. Was there any doubt in your mind that, you know, he might not make it?
Sometimes I felt that way because when we followed up on the campaigns on the trail, in some areas we were not able to attract a lot of people.
Okay.
Hindi naman kami naghahakot nun. Although, you know, since I was the Undersecretary for Field Operation, all the 25,000 people under the DENR were directly under me, and but I was never instructed to bring them to the campaign. They just went there on their own.
On their own.
But when I was following the campaign, sometimes you get disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, how come they are not coming here, you know? But of course, the real dynamics in the campaign is the organizing,
Right.
you know, and we have people to do that. So that was also the time when we were getting away from the old practice of getting to know the politicians only when he comes to the plaza and speak before them, because we have now national media
Yes.
and other things.
What were you doing? Out of what were you, what was the tactic? What was the strategy to move out of the mold of traditional campaigns?
Well, we had people in every community who were campaigning for him, and I think that what I felt was that they wanted a new face, and he presented the new kind of political leader that the country needed. You know, so I think he just came at the right time.
He was a viable alternative, as against the traditional or representative.
That's right, because you must understand the opposition at the time. You have Danding Cojuangco, who had a lot of money, Salonga, who made quite a name already in Congress and in the Senate, Mitra,
Of course.
who was really a long-time local politician. But here comes this professional soldier with great ideas on how to move the nation, and people felt that he would provide the most stable kind of governance that the country needed at that time.
What about Miriam? You mentioned a few names who were other candidates who were running whom he was running against.
We were
What
worried about Miriam because he had a strong appeal with the youth.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, he was coming quite close at the close of the campaign.
Right.
And what turned that around was when the strategist in the campaign came out with an item in Sullivan's column that the survey shows Cojuangco coming quite close after Ramos, and that convinced a lot of people who were supporting the other presidential candidates, I felt, to move for Ramos, to deny Cojuangco that chance to become the elected president.
That among others,
That among others. But to me, that was a turning point, one of the turning points in the campaign.
And then about a week or two before the election, that scandal at the printing office of the Batasan, right?
Yeah, that's right. Those were events that really led finally to...
Yeah. Who was the strongest actually, to your view? Cojuangco? Who was the candidate most worrisome for you?
At that time we were worried about Mitra and Cojuangco.
Okay.
Yeah, but every time we meet, we were presented with the survey, and Ramos was always ahead. Yeah, and Miriam coming in. We were worried about Miriam too.
So those three.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned about him having a long-range vision, and that apparently was making, was leaving an impact, was imprinting on people, the electorate at that time. Looking back at what he's done in the 6 years. Was he already saying then during the campaign what it was he was eventually able to accomplish during his 6 years?
Yeah, he was talking along those terms that the first 1/3 I will do this, the second part I will do this, and so it was. But I don't think it was understood well.
Yeah.
He was not a very good public speaker in my mind. Ano siya eh, hindi yung, he's not the one like sila Camilo Ocias who would hold you with the palm of their hands. So, but we appreciated those milestones that he was talking about in the campaign only when we were starting to work with him in the administration.
And you realized that
Yeah.
what you were doing was something
It
that
was
you
very
actually-
consistent,
yeah,
Ano
consistent.
siyang ganyan. Let's solve these issues first, and then we move on. With that success, we can now go for intergenerational, institutional issues. Maganda, very logical.
Okay. Election day, May. 6 weeks later, he's proclaimed the winner, no? By a plurality vote. I mean, what describe the campaigners, feeling at receiving that bit of news?
Well, we were ecstatic, because
Were you worried at any point during that 6 week stretch that,
I personally was worried, but I was talking with Joe Almonte, who was always optimistic. Oh, no, Vic, don't worry about those things, We are winning. We will surely win, And, that was infectious.
Okay.
So it erased all small doubts that we had that it might still go against him.
But eventually the proclamation came,
Proclamation came, and then after he was proclaimed, and after they have seen a few months of how he was running the country, everybody thought that, everybody now claimed that, I think 65% claimed that they were
they supported him.
voting for him.
As against the actual 22,
Yeah.
I think 23%.
That's right.
Did you meet? Did you meet each other during that period?
No, because
canvas?
I was not planning to join him in the cabinet because I was working on. I applied for a sabbatical fellowship at Harvard,
Oh, okay.
and I was accepted. So I was preparing for that, and.
So regardless of whatever the results
Yeah, because they were interviewing, I was invited, and I said, I have other plans, and so I was surprised on the day before the proclamation. I got a call from his campaign office. I said, Vic, you better attend tomorrow. You have been appointed acting secretary of the DENR. I said, no. How can that be? I did not apply. Well, your name is there. It will be announced. And the next day, I saw my name in the paper. So I was in a quandary. So I attended. I wore my barong. I went to Luneta. And then after that, we were told to go to Malacanang to take our oath.
Yes.
My goodness, I said, what is happening? So I was trying to find a way to talk to him, not to proceed with my proclamation. But there was no chance because, we were all seated there and they was calling formally.
Right.
So I ended up being inducted. My God. So after that cabinet meeting.
That same day, right?
That immediately.
That same afternoon.
Yes.
Yes.
So after that meeting, I I finally decided to sidle up to him. I said, "Sir, I have a problem, I was accepted sa Harvard. Pwede ba? Payagan mo na muna ako." He was upset, of course, medyo pinagalitan ako. And, when he looks at you in a different way, you know that he is upset. And I was really worried. So, wala. The next 4 days, I did not hear anything from him. So, I reported to the DENR. And then,
Did you expect anything actually in exchange for you campaigning for him? I mean, were you expecting to be appointed in the first place?
hindi.
Back of your mind, maybe.
Well, I knew I would be considered because I was an undersecretary during the time of Cory. But I was really, after working as undersecretary, really for 6 years, I was really fogged out, I really wanted to take a break. And that's why I was really keen on taking a year off, going to school. And finally, after 5 days, he called me and he said, okay, you can go. So he asked me who should I appoint as OIC. Well, I made some recommendations and he appointed as OIC.
Right. It was the shortest stint.
5 days. In fact, it was in the newspapers. The first, and I was very. I was ashamed that I had to embarrass him that way.
But you had to take this scholarship, no?
It was a fellowship.
A fellowship.
Was
it
that was
Kennedy?
to take my master's degree at the Kennedy School
KSG, no?
for master's in public administration.
Yes. So, you went on parole for how long? A year?
1 year.
1 year, okay.
Oh, so
He expected you to come back, yes or no?
I got a call. And after my graduation, I got a call and said, the president wants you to report immediately. Because I wanted to take my family for 1 month, to tour the New England states.
Yes.
And I said, can I take 1 month off? I said, no. He said, you are coming back immediately.
Who was this?
There was a one from Malacanang. I got a call directly from Malacanang.
You don't remember?
I don't remember
who called you?
anymore.
Anyway, okay.
Called. So I had to make new arrangements because I was with my whole family.
Yes.
So
They were expecting a month's vacation.
they were expecting a vacation. So we had to come home. So I was able to get a flight via Korea coming here, and then I stayed overnight in Korea.
So you came back after a year. You completed your studies in the United States, and quite reluctantly you came back. Had to cut a month's vacation time. And you were appointed as?
I was appointed presidential assistant.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in charge
energy.
of energy and environment.
Energy and environment. But still within your previous, the
That's
scope of your previous function. Who was Environment Secretary? Who took over you, by the way?
First was Rico Mali, who was OIC, and then the former president of Silliman University, si Angel Alcala.
Oh, yes.
Was appointed.
And you stayed on as PA Energy and Environment Affairs. What did he ask you to do? I mean,
Well, he wanted me to be with him all the time, but not really myself alone, because we were a group of presidential assistants.
Yes.
What he wanted to know is that there must be a presidential assistant with him in all official functions to take note of what was discussed and agreed upon.
What exactly did you do as PA Energy and
Well,
Environment?
I monitored all the issues on these sectors, and then wrote reports and progress reports to him.
So that was it was like a parallel function, ano, Secretary, with
Not really, because we are looking at the whole, gamot. So it does not involve the organizational issues
yes,
of the
organization,
DNR,
but
but
policy. I mean, correct,
basically policy.
programs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you were like a shadow or
More a backup.
parallel.
Yeah, parallel. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was well, environment was a pretty big issue. The other one was, I think, at about the same time, the Department of Energy was reconstituted, right?
That's right. Yeah. The when during Cory's time when we came in there, we came in as Department of Energy, Environment and Natural Resources, DENR. But we realized we could not handle such a large portfolio, so we gave up the energy, sector. That's what happened.
And then, eventually, no, I was eventually there was some controversy, no? Midstream, about 1995. Romulo, Confessor, Season, your immediate predecessor, nag-substitution si FVR at about 95, no? For so many reasons, and eventually you took over from Secretary Alcara, yeah?
That's right. Yeah. As early as February, I was already told by the president, Vic, I will send you back to the DNR, but keep it under wraps for the time being, because you have to wait for the recess in Congress, so that otherwise, if you are appointed immediately, you come in as an acting secretary. So you wait for the recess so that you can be appointed as a full-fledged secretary.
Okay. Oo nga, no?
Yeah. So I waited until July, July 1 to be to take my oath. But but few months in February, I was already told that I would go back there, and Angel Alcala will be moved to CHED.
To?
CHED.
Yeah, right.
As chairman of CHED, yeah.
Chairman of, also a new
Because he was basically an academician,
educator, academician. Right, because Siliman, ano?
Yeah, he was president of Siliman University.
So, what were the instructions? What were your marching orders when FVR gave you the...
Nothing specific, but when we inaugurated the project in the Cordillera, in the forest, he was looking up like that and he said, Vic, I want to make sure that this forest will stay that way. It was... so, based on that, I came up with a policy immediately that for any logging companies to apply for a permit to operate, they must submit aerial photos of their operations. And the reason I did that was because I knew that in previous administrations, they were always going against, they were cutting more than what they were supposed to do. And the aerial photo would do that. And if they had submitted this evidence, I would have canceled them outright. So most of them decided not to apply. Only the ones who are doing well, like PICOP, IDC, and then there is this one in Surigao owned by the San Victoris, and then another one, Puyat, who applied. And because they were, these were the ones who have been operating for more than 50 years, and you can see that they still have canopies of forest because they were doing it properly. Because in 1 hectare of virgin forest, you have about 300,000 cubic meters. the ones that, the mature ones would constitute about 1/3. If you gather only that, and you wait for another 30 years, you will have another thick forest to harvest from.
So to him,
But they were not doing that because they were overcutting,
yeah, they were just
except for a very few companies. That's why I had very strong pressure from the industry to open up as previous years. But I knew I had his support.
okay.
So I was steadfast
Okay.
in my policy.
So so the guidance from him was responsible stewardship.
Yes. And he was also supportive of our shift. He was the one who signed the executive order that will shift from logging to community stewardship, because we have 18 million people, mostly poor, living in our own forest. And these are the kaingineros mostly. So we recognize their inherent rights there, as long as they organize and as long as they cut within the sustained yield of their stewardship areas. That was the EO on community forestry.
Right, right. Social no? May
Social forestry.
dimension yung approach as against
As against
Previous
a logging industry,
purely commercial.
corporate, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Was that also was that him? You've known him already for several years. You've worked with him already for several years. Was that him? Was that
It was expected of him because he has his he was very well grounded. He knows this country on every square meter. When we travel by helicopter, he would be looking at a map, comparing what is there with the map. And when we plan what roads to repair, one time he gathered the guys from Pangasinan in the office and said, "Boys, we have savings this year. What are the roads that need repair in your areas?" So I said, "Sir, San Nicolas, Natividad." And he said, "Which one? Are you talking of Nining or this one, San Jose?" And I was surprised because these are very small roads in a town that you don't normally visit,
and he knew it.
He knew exactly what I said, That was very impressive. He just does not know the geographic, also the people who live there.
Tell me about his penchant for the details. I mean, I've heard it from your colleagues in the cabinet, but tell me of your impressions of how detailed a man FVR can be.
Well, the reason he can be very detailed is because he has a very systematic way of managing. His filing system is fantastic, He would say, "I need that paper about what I delivered as a eulogy to this captain, 15, 16 years ago. It happened this way." He had that kind of mindset. My goodness, I said, this is really, so his mental framework is backed up by a system that he has himself developed, which was a filing system that you won't be able to see anywhere else.
But he expected everyone else in his official family to work that way,
Oh, he was very demanding boss. If he if you're not up and about at 5 o'clock in the morning,
You're late.
you are not doing your job.
Oh.
You know, and I had a problem waking up early. You know, that was one of the biggest adjustments I had to make working under him. He was very systematic. You know, he when we were in the palace, every Wednesday we would meet for personnel matters.
Right.
Every Wednesday and so on. Yan. So he makes decisions on appointments and I also noticed, you know, because when I was in Harvard, I focused on managing the presidency as an area of study. So I was very mindful on his methods. And I noticed immediately that, you know, when he calls for early morning meetings, it is to settle issues. So meron kang kasalanan, most likely you are called to report very early in the morning.
Oh, so ano na yun? Signal na yun.
Signal yon. That's why I was telling when I was tinatanong ako ng mga kaibigan ko sa media, sabihan mo naman ako. I never give them any details. I said, just be there early in the morning, find out who are being called to meetings. So he settles these issues quickly. Another thing that I noticed, if he felt close to you, minumura ka. He was a very vicious, when he, because when I was I was really startled to know him that way, because I told him, you know, this fellow that you have chosen to work in this mountain garbage, in Smoky Mountain. He has no money, I said. Ay, pinagalitan ba naman ako? Hindi ko alam na siya palang namili, So sabi si Louis Opus, Sir, congratulations, bagong-bago ka pala dito, pinapagalitan ka. Bakit? Pagka pinagalitan ka ni boss, ibig sabihin malapit siya sa'yo. Sabi ko, hindi na bali malapit, masakit masyado magsalita itong boss natin, sabi ko. But it was like that. I have learned to accept that, although in a very difficult way.
It included curse words?
Oh yeah, pagka-kwan. Kagaya nung pagka I remember there was big time attorney was working, asawa ng I will not mention the name anymore. Close siya sa wife but not to this fellow. I was surprised that he was very nice to him. He just told him what was wrong with what he did. But when I saw him upbraiding Speaker de Venecia, he was really very vicious. So I said, "Oh, so this fellow is close to him."
But this was all in private.
It's all in private.
Correct.
Yeah.
Unlike certain dispensations.
He never upbraids you in public.
Right.
Oh, never.
Right.
At saka, sometimes he has people close to him. They would go directly to him. Ito yung mga assistants niya sa Vietnam, mga ganyan. Going for trouble, who are under me. Wala, babalik niya. You go through your boss. Very consistent. Only a good manager would be doing that consistently.
Follow the right procedures.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was very consistent. That's why you can really, give up your life for a fellow like that. He supports you completely. He never told me to do this, to do that, to do that. No. The policy is quite clear, and we were proceeding on our own, and we got his full support. Nagkakamali rin ako. Pinapagalitan ako in private.
Yeah, and then sets you right.
Oh, and then he supports me in public.
Tell me about the tenor during cabinet meetings or the cluster meetings. What was it like? I mean,
The cabinet meetings under him were not really, to my mind, not very productive because we were not discussing in a full exchange of ideas.
No, why?
Tapos na eh.
Oh.
Because he wanted full consultation of all stakeholders. That's why before we go to a cabinet meeting, we have already made decisions. Yung kanyang CSW, complete staff work.
Okay.
So first, the undersecretaries would be quarreling with each other from the agency to present their viewpoints. And then, if there is continue, the executive secretary comes with a compromise that everybody will be agreed. So when we meet in the cabinet, confirmation na lang.
Update. Okay. Proceed.
Oh,
Go ahead.
confirmation. Then the president says, "Oh, this is not complete staff work. You return this to the agencies."
Oh, that was bad.
Ganon yan. So, he believes in complete consultation. And everybody must agree because, that is the basic ailment of developing countries. Yung coordination is very poor. That is one thing that we can really learn from the Japanese. The Japanese would discuss things. Ringisho tawag nila. The idea starts from the lowest point in the bureaucracy and then moves up until it comes to the boss. And then 90% of the time is discussions and agreements. In most countries, especially Western, they decide first and then convince the bureaucracy to do this, to do that, and make adjustments later. That's why the implementation in the Western way is less rigid and not sustainable.
Unlike, you're saying it's different in an Asian context.
Especially the Japanese, the Ringishu method tawag nila. Yeah. And he has followed that.
Was that something he did as well, insofar as mobilizing the environment stakeholders, loggers, miners, communities, government?
Yeah, that was our job. Kami ang gumagawa noon. But as long as it is within the major framework of his policies, what he wanted to do, he was just quiet about it. Just show support publicly.
Paano niya na but that's, Secretary, that's a very diverse field. On one end, you have the companies whose sole motivation is profit and
That's right.
commerce, and then you have the communities, the social, the social networks on the ground whose vision is sustainability. What was FVR's formula to to balance off those interests?
Well, he agreed to give privilege to the corporations who have done their job properly.
Okay.
But he also decided to give proper attention and privilege to the communities who are living there. That's why he authored that EO, shifting to community stewardships. It was under his term when we gave almost 3 million hectares of our national forest under the ancestral domain claims of the IPs, indigenous peoples.
To the communities, area
In this particular case, the indigenous peoples.
Yes, IPs.
Iba pa yung communities na these are the poor people, poor farmers who had no land in the lowlands. They went up to do kaingin work. This was important for these communities because if you look at the history of civilizations that have failed, it was not because of military conquest. It's because they have lost the capacity to produce their food. And that is what's happening in the deforestation of our forest and the continuous erosion of the topsoil. So he wanted to make sure that we are able to prevent that, to stabilize the uplands.
Okay.
And the only way to do that is to make the communities responsible for these stuff.
Well, let me get to that. The crisis periods. Pinatubo. Interrupted before the Ramos administration came in, but you inherited the environmental backlash, Lahar, whole communities. I mean, how did FVR try to solve that backlash?
The one thing that the problem from Lahar was not just the flooding, but many of the landowners lost the boundaries.
Right.
And FBR wanted to make sure that the integral borders are preserved by developing digital tie points. And he did it by satellite. So that whether it's even if the physical border are lost, the rightful landowners can still claim the borders that they used to have. That was the work of NAMRIA, which was an agency under the DENR.
Technology rin, ano?
Technology was used.
GPS, that positioning systems. Okay. Oil spills. Meron bang oil spills during your time?
In the oil spill, this was the the Marindoque Mark Copper,
the Boac River.
Boac River was completely polluted because of the tailings from Mark Copper. The problem of that is they allowed the company to throw their mine tailings in the bay, Calangcan Bay, and completely destroy the corals there. And with the new laws, that is no longer allowed because these are considered critical biodiversity areas.
Yes.
And so I was very firm in not allowing the company to continue operation because there was no longer any viable area where they can throw their waste. That's why they ended up leaving the country.
Yeah. How did FBR take to those lapses?
He was very firm. Ang sabi niya sa akin, you have to be firm against hearing companies like this. That's why I welcome that. Very clear ang kanyang guidelines.
If I remember also, Secretary, at about the same time, this was when we were putting into our statutes already legislation for sustainable development. Diba? Was it right? I mean, no other administration has actually taken a look at development that way.
He really believed in these things. In fact, we were doing it matter of factly until during one of the hearings in Congress, Senator Maceda told me in public that it looks like you are more serious with the environment than before. I said, of course we have to be serious. So, because we were already talking about climate change and their impact on our lives, we would lose 30% of our land area close to the seas, and we have to prepare for these things. And he he was very conversant on the major issues on the environment.
So it's not just development, but development na sustainable, ano? So may vision talaga, kung ganun.
Meron eh. Long term siya eh. Ang maganda sa kanya, long term, at the same time, he knows the details.
Okay.
So he was not talking in empty words. He knew, and then he knew how to get things done eh. Implementer siya basically.
His being an engineer have something to do with that?
I think so. That kind of ano. And then yun sa West Point, basically it's an engineering course eh.
Yeah. 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 As a public servant now, your impressions of FVR as civil servant number 1, what were they?
Well, he was, because of his long-term vision and because of his effective, systematic way of management, he was able to turn around the economy, gave stability to our development, and then provided a lot of initiatives that will be good on intergenerational terms. And I think he was, in sum, he was a very effective public administrator. Maybe, I think he is the best administrator among any of our, compared to any of our presidents.
That we've had so far. Did that kind of level of performance impact on your organization as well? Did everyone, say na, we can't do a sloppy work because
All
the
the bureaucracy could feel the difference immediately because of the requirement for complete staff work, so it affects the workers on the ground. Oy, kulang pa kayo ng data nito. What's happening? Mga ganyan. Then you have to come up to meet your deadlines. Come up with facts and to meet your deadlines.
So
It trickled down all the way down. Nafe-feel nila yung difference.
So in a sense, it also upped the level
Oh yeah,
of service and performance.
definitely.
Okay. One incident that happened, December 96, if you remember, got everyone in the cabinet scared. That carotid artery surgery. I mean, how did that? How did that? How did that hit you?
It
On a personal note and on a cabinet perspective.
if I remember, I was unafraid. I was not worried. I knew that the medical technology on that is quite mature. But as a member of the cabinet, I was really impressed with what Executive Secretary Ruben Torres did by gathering us, following our constitution, that we have to, follow certain procedures. And it was done very, very professionally and in accordance with our laws.
Procedures being reminding everyone of the succession, the line of succession.
Yes. In fact, I was not aware of that until I attended the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you did learn that they informed the Vice President.
Yes.
Word to
All
word.
the proper things were done by Ruben Torres. I was not at all worried that he would die or something like that.
Ah, okay.
I was very confident that, because these things are, these are mature medical technologies.
Technology.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was not, if I remember right, I was not worried at all.
Okay.
In fact, after it was announced that it was successful, I was the one who delivered the prayer, and I was thanking the Lord for the gift of life and all that.
In the cabinet.
In the cabinet, yes.
Yeah. I remember. I remember that. In retrospect, looking back, where could FBR or you, as his environment, alter ego, where could you have done better?
Well, if we we could have, I wish that I could have focused on many areas like Boracay. I was the one who announced that the aquifers in Boracay was already full of E. coli,
Yeah.
and I was battered in the press for 3 weeks. Normally, when we were in the cabinet, I realized that every 6 months there would be a media crisis. You know, I think there is a certain conspiracy in the media to look for something that they can press on the cabinet members.
Cyclical.
Oh, may cycle. Oh, every 6 months. But all this media crisis that I had would not last for more than 10 days. Oh, ano lang, banat ng banat for 10 days and then it will dissipate.
May shelf life naman pala.
Ano yan? But in the case of Boracay, 3 weeks hindi pa tapos.
Okay.
Hindi pa tapos. And then, I was thinking already of resigning at that time because, baka wala nang confidence sa akin ang presidente.
What year was that, Secretary? You remember?
I think that was a year before the end of our term.
Okay.
Because he
97.
the president was against my pronouncements. He went there, nagmumog pa siya sa tubig dun eh. Oh, because, he was pushing for Boracay. It was chosen as the best beach in the world. And then here comes his environment secretary saying that it was dirty. I was doing my job, no? So I began to look forward to this media crisis because I realized that when you are in a crisis like that, you can make controversial policy decisions and it will be accepted because, like in the case of Marindoque, we were able to increase exponentially the penalties for throwing your waste like that.
Penalties.
And we were able to put it in the implementing rules and regulations.
Right. And increase as well the level of standards, no?
Yeah.
For operating safely.
Safety
and procedures to keep the environment safe.
So, that's why, every crisis was an opportunity to push for certain policies which could otherwise not be acceptable by the industries particularly.
That's very enlightening, Secretary.
Under any circumstance, the industries particularly will be affected, would fight heaven and earth, use their supporters in Congress, to put down any such initiatives. But in the light of crisis like that, a media crisis, they would not go against you. So, we always look at it as an opportunity.
Great. Was there something lacking? Kulang pa? Was there something kulang pa that needed to be done? Or were you fine with 6 years in FVR?
If we had given another 6 years, I think, the institutionalization of this way of governance would have been more stabilized. But under our constitution, it was not possible. And the president, in his way of doing things, also would not want to personally push for these things. He wanted things to come from below and determine the way forward.
You've met each other a bit in the course of, did you continue on into the Estrada administration, or?
I was one of those asked to continue,
Uh-huh.
and I was the only one who turned it down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I wanted to join the president already in retirement and do more work through the NGOs, which I did.
Or continue the 1-month vacation in New England.
No, actually, I went home to my small farm and planted trees. I planted the trees that we were losing in our forest.
Oh,
That's why
okay.
today I have an arboretum of all the trees that
Wow.
are in danger of extinction. Mga mangkono, yung mga ganyan.
So you dapat pumunta para
Ironwood.
makahanap.
Oh, may mga foresters studying in schools, they come to my small farm
Oh, nice.
to do their work.
Forest laboratory.
Kasi marami na yun, malalaki na. They are used as mother trees, and then we pick up the seeds, we germinate, and then we give free seedlings for public schools and plazas
Okay.
in our area.
You've been, ever so often, you'd meet with FVR over the past 20 years.
Yes,
what are
because
those meetings like?
well,
Reminiscing, I guess.
yes, and I am a member of the foundation.
Right.
That's why I get the opportunity to meet him on a regular basis.
Looking back from the first time you met him to today, did your first impressions still carry to this day, or have they changed?
No change. He's still the same. He was still doing this. He was still talking about a national team, still talking about unity and solidarity. Very consistent. I have not met someone who has been as consistent as he was when it comes to defining what needs to be done for this country.
What would be, to your mind, his legacy?
I think his main legacy to me is that he has shown that with proper governance, you can turn around a developing country like the Philippines. I think that should give a sense of hope for those who will come after him, if they do their job seriously.
I'm good. Thank you very much, Secretary.